Alright, time for another DraftPhysics.com video presentation. Debate physics also. But again, as stated, you can't get any people to interact where you make an argument, they make a rational counter argument, and then you can make a counter argument. But can't really do any of that stuff. They won't allow it. Just can't have it happen. So anyway, I did make a video on this subject. So this is going to be some Greene crap on the double slit. And it's such nonsense. I mean, it's so inaccurate. It's such crap. I mean, you have to call it lying because it's just so dishonest. It's such a misrepresentation of the phenomena. All right, so we'll skip introductions, blah, blah, blah. Try to anyway. And get into just, this is, I mean, if your science has to distort the truth so much to make its point, I mean, isn't that evidence that they really don't have a point? Come on, just be honest. It does look like, well, they can't tell the story honestly because the physics is crap. Well, that's interesting. So they won't let me play it now. Anyway, all right. So I'll get through the commercial. All right. So this is on the Stephen Colbert show thing or whatever he is, the Late Show or something. I don't know.
Your colleague's been affected in any way by this?
Yeah, it's utterly awful. I mean, for more than 50 years, science has driven innovation, prosperity, and look.
Yeah, and it's driven it into nothing. I mean, you haven't done anything. You invented a bunch of stuff that does absolutely nothing. Quarks, Higgs bosons, all this crap doesn't do a damn thing. This stupid LIGO stuff. I mean, amazing amounts of money they're spending on this stupid, old, useless, dumb idea from the very beginning, and they're not producing anything. There's no even results they're getting. It's not even working, and they're still spending money on it.
If you want to make America great again, you make America smart, you make America think, and you keep America at the...
Oh, yeah, well, blah, 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 blah. Fucking idiots. It's just idiots. I mean, I didn't play this part before, so I didn't know he was making a counter-political statement. The liberals are not going to make America great either. They're going to fail dismally, okay, because they're retarded morons who think everything is free.
Frontier of science.
Okay. One of the ways, one of the things we like having you on for is that often you're here when we're talking about an anniversary of a major breakthrough in modern science. What are we celebrating right now?
Well, this is the 90th anniversary of one of the most famous experiments in all of science. It's called the...
Oh, so this is such a lie, right? The 90th anniversary? It's not the 90th anniversary of anything. So just get this straight. In 1920 something, all right, they did a couple of experiments. They're not slit experiments. There's no slits involved. There's nothing. They're electron experiments, and there's nothing to do with slits. So it's just such a lie. Oh, it's just amazing. Okay.
double slit experiment, and it established the quantum laws of physics.
Okay, and the double...
So let's just understand. So he's basically saying, yes, we established all our bullshit on these experiments that we're now going to lie about what the experiments are. We're going to distort and pervert it so egregiously that it can only be called a lie. And so we're so desperate because we can't even justify the nonsense of our physics, and so we're just going to lie about the foundational experiment.
Slit is that the baking soda volcano with two holes in the top? What is the double slit?
It's an experiment which is pretty straightforward to describe. In fact, I have a few animations that...
Right, a few simplifications, and so this has nothing to do. This has nothing to do with the double slit experiment in photons. It has absolutely nothing to do with it. There's no slits. Again, there's no fucking slits.
I can give you a feel for it.
Okay,
so if we take a look at this
Jim,
first
can we put
one.
them up on the screen back?
Yeah, so just imagine that you have a gun that's...
So I did a short on this, And apparently it got canceled. Okay, so the last short I published was 450 views. This one got 19. It's just like, what the fuck? This stupid arbitrary view count crap. So we'll see. I mean, maybe it's just because it was a Friday. Who knows? But it's just such bullshit.
Firing bullets or pellets at a screen that has two slits, two openings. Those are the double slits. And your intuition tells you that those pellets that get through the left opening will land in a band aligned with it on the left, and those that get through the right will land in a band aligned.
Right, so we know these experiments not done that way, okay? It's not 14 inches away, the screen, and we know that the light spreads with distance, and we know that's not going to happen anyway. So there's the first lie, is that we already don't know that's not going to happen with very small objects with a very small distance. So if you did the experiment with two slits that are a millimeter apart, well, then on the screen 10 meters away, you would expect a pattern that's only a millimeter apart. Okay? There's no this. Okay? One slit doesn't go over there, and one slit go over there. That doesn't happen. It's such a lie.
With it on the right.
That makes sense.
And that's what happens.
So it's not what happens, okay? So if you do the experiment as like I said, even if you did it with baseballs from the real dimensions that you're doing the photon experiment, it means you have to shoot the baseballs 90 yards, a huge distance.
With
Just
bullets.
good, with bullets.
Okay.
Let's now run that experiment with one change. We're simply going to dial down the size of the bullets, making them smaller.
So that's not the one change. You're making the slits really, really tiny also. Come on.
Small as little particles like electrons. Your intuition tells you that pretty much the same thing should happen.
So there's no slits. Okay, so the experiment he's going to describe, there's no slits involved.
Right.
Those electrons that go through the left will land in a band on the left. Those that go through the right will land in a band on the right. But the amazing thing, which was discovered in 1927.
Right. So 1927 is the 90th anniversary, right? So this was been 1917 or something. 2017. So anyway, let's just get through it. So there were two guys that they did get the Nobel Prize. So there was two different groups. They got the Nobel Prize for this junk, I'll call it. And there's no slits involved.
That's not what happens. This was an experiment that actually happened in some sense by accident. There were two
So this story isn't even true.
physicists out at Bell Labs, Davidson and Germer. They're doing an experiment. It explodes.
Nothing exploded, so I don't know where he got this exploding thing from. What happened is the nickel gets oxidized. Okay, so the stuff they're using gets a layer of oxidation on it. And so what they had to do was heat it, and then the oxidation all flaked off, and so then the metal becomes pure again. Something like that. I don't remember any explosion being part of the story.
They fix it by the nickel crystal they were firing electrons on got tarnished. They heated it up.
So he did say tarnish. So what the explosion was, we have no idea what he's talking about, right? So yeah, it oxidized, and the experiment doesn't work if it's if the metal's got a whole layer of some other oxide on top of it.
And when they heated it, they unwittingly changed the experiment into what we're going to look at right here. And what they found is...
So no slits. There's no slits.
When you fire the electrons at the barrier with the two slits...
There's no slits. They didn't fire it at a barrier with slits. None of this happened. This is all just a story. It didn't happen. This isn't the experiment. It's a lie.
You don't just get two bands. You get more.
Oh, more. Yeah, you get like 5. Ooh. All right, so again, we know the slit experiment has these patterns, the fringe patterns. We know that they have a specific rules. You have a double maxima, all kinds of little crap. It's not the same experiment. It's not the same function. It's not doing the same thing. And there's no fucking slits.
Bands. And that simple change.
Okay, so I'll play this insane nonsense that he speaks here after I draw it. Okay, so just to show you the experiments. So I did this in the clip really quick, but I mean, it's hard to do all this in 1 minute, obviously. So I didn't do the whole story in 1 minute. Okay, but there were the two experiments, and this is, I'm not probably giving them full credit, but and they're both done inside of a vacuum, okay, to get rid of the whole oxidation thing and all this other crap. So one of them that he didn't mention that happened at the same time that also shared the Nobel Prize. So two guys did this and two guys did this. And so what these guys did was took really thin pieces of metal like gold or silver, little leaf kind of metals, and they shot electrons into the leaf, okay, into the really thin metal. And they got a pattern, okay. They got deflections that were a quanta of distance, okay, you could argue. There was some reason why they were separated, okay. They would go in and they would get deflected a certain amount, and it was, in quantizable chunks, the amount of deflection. So you could almost argue that, it's as simple as the electron goes in. If it hits one electron, it gets bent a certain amount. Okay, there's a little bit of a deflection. If it hits a second one, then there's more deflection. And vice, if it could hit a third one, there's even more deflection. Now, obviously, you could deflect in two directions, so it could go back this way, and then it would go back this way, and then that way, and then that way, So it could deflect, but the point is there would always be a quantum of distance between the deflections because each electron is under the same pressure. And the whole idea is the idea is these crystals are in layers. So you're hitting electrons at different layers in the material. And you could also argue that where you hit, how deep you hit, would also do the same thing. So if you hit the third layer, you'd deflect this much, a certain angle. And if you hit the second layer, it'd be a little bit less. And if you hit the first layer, it'd be a little bit less. So you could understand that it's just about what layer you hit an electron at. And so the deeper the electron goes before it hits an atom would decide how much deflection there is. So you can sort of understand why there's a pattern. It's not, but there's no slits. There's nothing, no two slits. There's no two slits in the experiment, nothing. All right, the other experiment's even less too slitty in the sense that it's the same idea. You're just going to shoot the electron straight down this time, and you're going to see how they reflect. And so they reflect at these angles, like 68 degrees and 46 degrees, and there's a probability to where they're going to reflect. And so it's the same principle though, because all they're really saying is that you have a material and you have layers of crystal. And so obviously what you're saying is if one goes in and it deflects a certain amount in the first layer, and then it deflects a certain amount in the second layer, it deflects a certain amount in the third layer, and then reflects. And so obviously from each layer you're going to get a different reflection. So depending on what layer you hit the electron at will give you a different angle of reflection. Because it's just like when light goes through a transparency and does that bullshit. Same difference. Same thing as being diffracted. Okay, and so the angle is different where it actually hits the electron, so it isn't angle in, angle out. It's angle distorted out. And depending on how deep you go into the material, the simple argument is you get a different location that you'll end up popping out of the material. So that's not, it's so distant. There's no slits. Again, I have to, why would they keep saying there's slits in the experiment when there's no slits in the experiment? These two experiments don't have any slits. You can't use electrons and do a slit experiment because you could even understand yourself. How could I possibly randomly, how would I expect an electron to come out randomly out of a slit, right? I mean, it's charged. So of course the surfaces are covered in electrons. So of course the surfaces are going to cause the electrons going to go away from the surfaces. So it's going to get bent by the charge of the surfaces. So it's just such a nonsense to, pretend you could have a random event happen with a charge going through any material, because all materials have some kind of charge on them, either positive or negative, and it's going to cause the electron to either go into it or it's going to cause the electron to reflect, to evade it. So obviously you would expect deflections with electrons. If you actually shot electrons through slits, you would expect them to be deflected. You'd have no reason to believe they wouldn't be. It wouldn't make any sense if they weren't deflected by the slit. All right. So this hyperbole is just so... this is why, the accusation is legitimate. Physics is out of control. It's got its head so far up its ass.
Going from our expectation of 2 bands to, in this case, 5 bands, that represents the single greatest upheaval in our understanding of reality that the species has ever encountered.
Isn't that just an insanely nonsense statement? That this is so profound, that something deflects off a surface at an angle. It's the most profound event that ever took place in physics. What a pile of shit.
Why does that happen? Okay. Why does that happen?
That is the question. Why does this happen?
Yeah, that is my question.
And amazingly, we have the mathematics.
So again, just more exaggerations and lies. Your math doesn't work. The simple truth, okay? The Young double slit experiment, right? The Young analysis doesn't work. If you put the waves in the middle, the wave centers in the middle of the surfaces, the slits, you're not going to get the right answer. You have to have the wave centers right on the surfaces. So the single impediment and the single opening, the single slit, are really the 2 surface experiments. The surfaces are the math that works. And the double slit is the 4 surface experiment. And the key ingredient is you have these 2 outside surfaces that are very far apart. And that's the key to the whole difference in the pattern. And I've made numerous videos about that. But this is just such a lie.
The math of quantum physics that describes that perfectly.
Just absolute nonsense. Where's the perfect description? There's no perfect description with their math.
Right? But 90 years later, we are still arguing about what that math tells us about the nature of reality.
So that's the interpretation part, because we have to make up some magical story that the photons are afraid of slits, or that a new universe is created every time a photon goes through an opening.
Because if those bullets get small enough, things get uncertain.
Things get uncertain, and moreover, because the
they're harder to see.
Bands are spread out. It must mean that the particles themselves, in some sense, are spread out.
Okay, so too ridiculous, right? Now, why is there in any sense at all do I have to believe that? When again, his own example of electrons, I would have every expectation that the electrons would find the surfaces really challenging, whether they're positive or negative. If they're negative, they're going to be disturbed by them. If they're positive, they're going to be... And how can they be neutral to an electron, right? Neutral to an electron is what? It's clearly not the same thing as saying positive or negative. Because neutral is going to look like... Neutral has to be half positive and half negative. It can't be, there's no such thing as neutral. It has to be both positive and negative.
Which leads us to the idea that particles are actually waves. If a wave...
So, of course, it doesn't lead anyone to that idea if they're sensible and rational.
But particles at the same time.
That's right. So they're both particles and waves at the same time.
Okay, so, again, silly. I mean, even the physicists back in the 1920s would have said the joke differently. They would have said, no, on Tuesdays, Thursdays, and Sundays, it's a particle, and on, whatever. The rest of the days, it's a wave.
It's a crazy thing.
Okay, that uncertainty at that small scale, how come I don't feel that uncertainty, at the big scale? I'm here, I'm not particle and wave, I'm particle, aren't I?
You think so?
I do.
Yeah. The math shows quite clearly.
All right, so whatever, the math. Again, this resort to mathematics, as if there is any math that ever answers these questions without you giving them the answer. If you don't give them the answer, they can't give you back the answer. Is that what the truth is? Their math needs so many details about exactly what condition the entire universe is in that it's useless. It doesn't predict anything.
That the bigger you get, the weirdness of the quantum world gets suppressed.
Okay.
But it's still there. So you actually are subject to the laws of quantum physics.
So it's still just more bullshit about promises. So, and again, the experiments kind of dictate. I mean, again, the slit experiment in light, the evidence is that most of the photons go right through the slit. And unless you make the slit insanely narrow, okay, there's a very bright spot in the middle and the rest are very weak. And you have to make it in tiny, insanely narrow slit for you to force every photon to be deflected.
We demonstrate some quantum weirdness at a scale that people would understand.
Yeah.
What is this over?
All right, so they just move on to the superconductor bullshit. All right, so we'll play the other video. There's another one. All right, so this one is called the double slit. It's only 5 minutes, so I figure what the hell. Now, I might have played this before in the past, who knows? But bullshit, nonetheless.
J.D. Power now ranks Sleep Number #1 in customer satisfaction with...
All right, obviously a clip from something else.
And in fact, that's just what happens. Those balls that make it through always hit the screen directly behind either the left slit or the right slit.
Right, and if that's all they said, that'd be fine. Like I said, so if we make the slits less than half a millimeter apart, then what we'll see on the screen is just two little dots a half millimeter apart. So obviously that's not what we see. So obviously that's not what happens.
The double slit experiment was much like this, except instead of bowling balls, you use electrons.
So again, they didn't use electrons. It was called the double slit for hundreds of years, 150 years before they ever did an electron experiment. So it's really not the double slit experiment, electrons. And as I just pointed out, there's no slits in the fucking experiment. I mean, especially the ones done in the 1920s. No slits involved. It's just a lie.
Which are billions of times smaller. You can picture them like this. Let's see what happens if I throw a bunch of these balls. When electrons are hurled at the two slits, something very different happens on the other side. Instead of hitting just two areas, the electrons land all over the detector screen, creating a pattern of stripes.
So again, they keep saying it. It's not true. Now, at least this one does illustrate it, the central maxima being wider, but we don't know if that's accurate. Well, I'm saying it's not accurate, actually. When it's done with an electron, there's no double maxima. Okay, so they've just made up a pattern. This isn't anything called real. There's no real data here. This doesn't represent the truth. And obviously we know the real double slit experiment goes to 0 and then starts up again, and then, and that this is always an odd number in the middle, which this is 7. And then there's 4 and 4 on the two sides.
Including some right between the two slits. The very place you'd think would be...
So, yeah, right between the two slits. Right between the two slits. Oh, well, yeah, obviously, right in the middle.
blocked. So
it's a millimeter screen. This thing is, 4 feet across, obviously. I mean, a slit. So obviously the middle is some place that's a line right through this middle that you'd never even be able to see. The stuff going this way and that way, the stuff going that way, pointing to the middle, is a little tiny line right here. Okay, it's not even part of it. You can't even see it in the experiment. It's such a small amount of space. The rest of them are being created by stuff going this way and stuff going this way. The stuff going opposite directions is invisible.
what's going on? Well, to physicists, even in the 1920s, this...
So again, no slits involved in the 1920s with electrons. Just a complete lie to say there were slits, to say you threw anything through a slit. It's just a lie. It's just a fucking lie.
pattern could mean only one thing. Waves.
Obviously, it's... Sorry, that's not going to explain it. So again, if you had waves coming out of the centers, right? So if I took the two centers and I put a wave going out of that center, that means the middle of the slit would be your mathematical distance that you'd be concerned with. That would be your vectors. And that doesn't work. The one that gets the right answer are the surfaces. The largest distance and the smallest distance between two surfaces. That's what gets the right answer. And that's not where your waves would be. Clearly not a wave phenomenon.
Waves do all kinds of interesting things. Things that bowling balls would never do. They can split. They can combine. If I sent a wave of water through the double slits, it would split in two.
Right, it would create two waves with their centers right in the middle of the slit. That math will get you the wrong answer.
And then the two sets of waves would intersect. Their peaks and valleys would combine.
I'm just again saying you won't get the right answer if you use two waves coming out of the slits. It won't mathematically get the right answer. Unless you make the slits so small that the distance between the two surfaces is smaller than a wavelength of light. Then you've turned the double slit into the single slit. And of course it doesn't matter if I have the surfaces really close. You can sort of understand. So I have two insanely narrow slits. Well, then the distance doesn't matter, right? The distance from the outside surfaces or the inside, I'm going to be the same distance, right? So it's going to be fudgeable. It won't matter anymore because it's just two sources now. I've turned a 4-source experiment into a 2-source experiment by making the slits insanely narrow. But if I make them normal size, I'm not going to get their pattern. I'm going to get a real double slit pattern. And when I get a real double slit pattern, it's going to show you that there's two surfaces out here, the outside surfaces, and there's two inside surfaces.
Getting bigger in some places, smaller in others, and sometimes they cancel each other out. With the height of the water corresponding to brightness on the screen.
So again, this analogy doesn't work. It doesn't get right answers. Again, unless you make the slits so narrow the water couldn't get through them.
The peaks and valleys would create a series of stripes.
And you won't get the right answer in the sense that that center won't be a double maxima. So if you use water waves don't make the center twice as big. So water waves fail to get the correct answer. And they've exaggerated here, right? See, they've cheated because they've sort of made this a little bit bigger. It's not a little bit bigger. It's the same size as all the others. They're cheating.
And what's known as an interference pattern. So how could electrons, which are particles, form that pattern? How could it...
By you lying. Yeah, that'll work. Do an experiment that has nothing to do with slits and then pretend it does.
A single electron end up in places a wave would go.
Particles are particles, waves are waves. How can a particle be a wave?
There you go. Too silly. But clearly, particles in a group can have that look like a wave. Okay, I mean the water molecules are obviously doing it in the water. Now there's a bunch of complex forces that are causing that to happen: gravity, and the forward motion, and the fact that the water's uncompressible. So there's lots of things that are causing the wave to happen. All right, where you don't have any of those complex things happening when you're just shooting a little photon next to a surface.
Unless you give up the idea that it's a particle and think, aha, this thing that I thought was a particle was actually a wave.
Yeah, so just bullshit. Just absolutely no reason to do this. There's just no reason to pretend you have any, this experiment is somehow forcing you to believe it's a wave. It's not forcing you.
A wave in an ocean? That's not a particle.
Well, of course it is. So again, why are we arguing? There's no, of course it is. And it's been given velocity based on what the other particles are doing. And collectively, they force the ones on the top to do this and the ones there to do that. And it's all cause and effect. And there's no woo in it at all.
The ocean is made out of particles, but the waves in the ocean are not particles.
Yeah, they are. I mean, it's simple truth, they are. I mean, the particles are in a circumstance, okay? Each particle of the water is sitting in a circumstance. Okay, so the ones, the deeper they are, the difference their circumstances in. And all they're doing is confronting pressure. So a particle moves and it hits pressure. Pressure says, you can't go this way anymore. So it has to go up or it has to go down. Well, obviously down is probably going to be more pressure too, right? So down isn't going to work because down's not very flexible. And where does it go? It goes up because that's where there's a place to go. Gravity is yielding, so it can go up in the gravity. But obviously when it goes up in the gravity, what goes up has to come back down again. So now the energy comes back down again, but it still can't go anywhere because there's pressure this way, there's pressure this way, and there's pressure this way. So it has to go back up again. But each particle is in that dilemma.
And rocks are not waves. Rocks are rocks. So a rock is an example of a particle, an ocean
Oh, that's just so silly.
wave is an example of an ocean wave. And now somebody's telling you a rock is like...
Yeah, that's right. The rock is made out of particles. The wave is made out of particles. It's all made out of particles, and there's just so fucking many of them. But they're all particles, electrons and protons ultimately. There's only one real universe. It's the little tiny one with the electrons and protons in it. And they're doing all of this stuff, okay, because of how they transfer energy.
like an ocean wave.
But there's no woo, there's no waves, there's no superpositions, there's no interference, there's none of that crap.
What?
Back in the 1920s, when a version of this experiment...
So, liar, shit for brain motherfucker. I mean, what the fuck is this crap? He looks about 20 years younger here, so I mean, I don't know when this was done. Oh, but anyway, what a fucking lie, all right? He called a version of this experiment. It's not a version of the experiment. It's not even fucking close to being a version of the experiment. There's no fucking slits. You really can't call it a version of the experiment when there's no fucking slit.
was first done, scientists struggled to understand this wavy behavior. Some wondered if a single electron, while in motion, might spread out into a wave. And the physicist Erwin Schrödinger
Oh, shit. There's no hope. Anyway, continue.
came up with an equation that seemed to describe
And you perverted it, and he denied that the electrons are doing any of this mushy shit. So that's part of the irony. He basically said none of this crap they're making up is truth. Okay. He didn't agree with any of this crap.
it.
Schrödinger thought that this wave was a description of an extended electron, that somehow an electron got smeared out, and it was no longer a point, but was like a mush.
There was a lot of argument.
I don't think he thought that at all, so fine. I'm saying he just gave you an equation that works, okay, in a vague notion sense of telling you a probabilistic outcome of where the electron Lance, he never said anything about electrons turning into mush. I don't remember that speech. I remember the speech he did make where he said, look, all this crap where they're saying, we collapse universes and shit is all a pile of crap.
About exactly what this represented.
Finally, a physicist named Max Born came up with a new and revolutionary idea for what the wave equation described.
Born said the wave is not a smeared out electron or anything else previously encountered in science.
Oh, whatever. It's a magic ton. Yeah. Shit. Alright, back. I had to drink some courage to get to even listen to this shit.
Instead, he declared it's something that's...
And he just declared. That's the way it works. They just make declarations. I say it's gremlins that mated with pixies. Gremlikskis. Yeah, they're half pixie and half gremlin.
really peculiar. A probability wave.
So they already know, okay, that most of the light just goes straight through the opening, right? When it's wide enough. It just goes straight through. And they just keep talking this horse shit.
That is, Born argued that the size of the wave at any location predicts the likelihood of the electron being found there.
Where the wave is big, that's not where most of the electron is. That's where the electron is most likely to be.
And that's just very strange.
Oh, whatever. It's just very stupid to think that, yes, of course, there'll be a probability. I can make an obstacle course, right? I can put a tin can in the street, and I can put a banana peel, and I can put something else, and I can make an obstacle course. And there'll be certain probabilities about which one causes people to fall down more. And then there'll be additional effects, like they roll on the can, and then they leap and land on the banana peel, and then they're more likely to get flung into traffic. So you can have some kind of rarer event happen because there's 2 previous events that happen. And then you could have 3 previous events. You know, you slip, slide, and then, you know, you catastrophically break your leg or whatever. So, yeah, this is such bullshit.
Right? So the electron on its own seems to be a jumble of possibilities.
So it's just such a lie to be talking about electrons doing any of this stupid wooey crap. Electrons are charged. They can't go anywhere without being affected. From an electron's perspective, everything in any place you put an electron, there's going to be a potential difference. It's never going to be perfectly, the same charge on this side that's on this side. It'll never be that way for an electron. So it's always in a world, okay, that is going to cause it to move in a direction because there's going to be a little more charge one way or a little less the other way. I mean, this is such bullshit. And you can't even set it up any other way, right? Because even if you try to guide electrons, the point is some go in this way, some go in over here, some go, like, even if you create a perfectly neutral place here, it's just about impossible to create a perfectly neutral for every location the electron enters.
You're not allowed to ask, where is the electron right now? You are allowed to ask, if I look for the electron in this little particular part of space, what is the likelihood?
So again, all these physicists want, I don't know, they want to destroy cause and effect. Why? Because they're actually religious kooks, I guess. There's no reason to say there's no cause and effect. There's no reason to say there aren't mechanisms that are causing every single outcome. It's just such bullshit to turn it into this wooey random crap. Nothing is random in the fucking universe. The universe can't do random. All it can do is synthesize random. Just like us. That's why we have to synthesize it. We can't find the random stone. We can't find some stone somewhere that'll do random for us. Because nothing in the universe is random.
Likelihood I will find it there. I mean, that bugs anyone. Anytime.
As weird as it sounds, this new way of describing how particles...
The new way is a big lie. So again, they just keep talking about data, okay, that isn't at all like what they described. So none of the electron experiments before like 1990 had anything to do with shooting electrons through a slit. None of them.
Particles like electrons move is actually right. When I throw a single electron, I can never predict where it will land.
And there's nothing amazing about that at all. Just because you can't know all of the charge fields it's going to be affected by.
But if I use Schrodinger's equation to find the electron's probability wave, I can predict.
And no, you can't use Schrodinger's equation because his equation requires you to know everything, to know where everything in the universe is and to know where all the charges are. So again, the equation is useless. It's like saying you could detect the absolute gravity of something in a point in space to an accuracy significant enough to control an electron. No, you couldn't. You couldn't even do it gravitationally. You couldn't predict where the electron's going to go because the tiny amounts of deflection differences in the gravity would cause a huge difference in its movement. And you can't know any of that. So this is all just such a lie. This equation doesn't answer any question that you already don't have the answer to because you have all the information in the universe, essentially. This basically, this little forky thing, wherever the fuck it is, that symbol means every piece of knowledge in the universe. Yeah, you don't have that. You never will have that.
With great certainty that if I throw enough electrons, then say 33.1% would end up here, 7.9% would end up there.
Right, and you could just do the experiment to find that out. So you don't need the equation. Oh, it's just so stupid. Yeah, there's likelihoods based on those conditions. And again, they can't tell you those numbers unless you give them those numbers in the first place. You have to tell them what those numbers are before they can repeat them. The equation can't answer the question until you've already told the equation what the percentages are.
And so on. These kinds of predictions have been confirmed again and again by experiments.
No, more lie. They didn't predict anything that they didn't already know. So again, they put the answer in and then just say, give me the answer. Well, yeah, I just gave you the answer, so I'll just hand you back the answer. You gave me the answer, so you're just giving the computer the answer and then saying, give me the answer, equation. And the equation says, well, you already just gave me it, so here, I'll give it back to you. I'll give you back what you already got. So again, if they don't do the experiment, they can't predict anything.
And so the equations of quantum mechanics turn out to be amazingly accurate and precise.
Lie.
So long as you can accept that it's all about probability.
Lie. So again, it's such a lie. It's all about circumstances. And the clear fact is photons are disturbed by surfaces. And they're disturbed in a very consistent and predictable way by surfaces. Probabilistic way. And we can know that. Yeah, and there's no woo involved. All right, so it's just so bad. It's just terrible, this planet we live on. That these people can get away with these egregious lies. Egregious. All right, so enough of that crap. So till the next time and such, really. I mean, I have done a ton of videos on the two slits, so type in slit or something else and you'll probably find videos on the subject where I explain how you can understand it's all just a simple mechanics. Surfaces break photons, and the fact is all you did is to break them was knock them out of phase. You took the pieces and knocked them out of phase, and then all you can do is put the phase back together again. Not complicated. All right, so till the next time and such.